In the middle of the hotel power outage, Jimin groped in the dark. Jungkook clasped his hand and claimed to have never been afraid during his time with him. A blackout traps Jimin and Jungkook in a haunted hotel corridor, where fear, secrets, and unspoken bonds surface in the suffocating dark. "Don't let go," Jimin whispered into the darkness, his voice trembling as something unseen scraped along the walls. The lights had died without warning, one sharp crack, a hiss, and then a suffocating black that swallowed the hotel whole. The corridor that had been warm with gold chandeliers minutes earlier now felt like the throat of a cave, damp and echoing with distant, unplaceable sounds. Jimin's fingertips skimmed the wallpaper as he moved, breath shallow, heart hammering so loudly he was certain whatever lurked in the dark could hear it. His hand brushed fabric, warm, solid, and instinctively he seized it. Jungkook's fingers tightened around his. "I'm here," Jungkook said, voice steady in a way that felt almost impossible. "You're safe." The words should have calmed him, they didn't. Because Jimin knew Jungkook well enough to recognize the subtle tension in his grip, the way his thumb pressed too firmly into the back of Jimin's hand, the way his breathing came through his nose in slow, controlled pulls. Jungkook was not fearless, he was choosing to be. Somewhere down the corridor, glass shattered. Jimin flinched and moved closer, shoulder bumping Jungkook's chest. The contact grounded him for half a second before a cold draft slithered along the floor, curling around their ankles like invisible smoke. "This place isn't right," Jimin murmured. They had arrived that afternoon, exhausted from travel, lured by the promise of a quiet mountain retreat. The hotel, perched above a fog-choked valley, had seemed charming in daylight, aged wood, antique mirrors, the faint scent of pine and old books. But now, stripped of light and warmth, it felt like a skeleton of itself. A floorboard creaked behind them. Jungkook turned, pulling Jimin with him. "Hello," he called, voice firm. "Is someone there?" Only silence answered, thick, watchful silence. Jimin swallowed. His mind betrayed him with memories he had spent years trying to bury. The night he'd been trapped in a rehearsal hall during a storm, the power gone, the doors jammed, the echo of his own voice answering him like a stranger. The panic had clawed at his chest then, just as it did now. "I hate the dark," he confessed, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Jungkook's grip softened, thumb brushing a slow circle against his skin. "You told me once you used to leave the TV on to sleep." Jimin blinked. "You remember that?" "I remember everything you pretend isn't important." Another sound, a dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across carpet, reverberated from the stairwell ahead. The air carried a faint metallic scent, sharp enough to sting the back of Jimin's throat. "Do you smell that?" Jimin asked. Jungkook inhaled, a pause. "Yeah." They stood there suspended between instinct and reason. The logical choice was to return to their room, lock the door, and wait for the power to return. But the corridor seemed to stretch endlessly behind them, warped by the absence of light. Forward or back, both felt equally wrong. "Stay close," Jungkook said. They moved together, steps cautious, shoes whispering against the carpet. Jimin focused on the sensations anchoring him to reality, the warmth of Jungkook's palm, the faint brush of his sleeve, the rhythm of their breathing falling into sync. A door slammed somewhere below. Jimin jerked. "That wasn't the wind." "No," Jungkook agreed quietly. They reached the stairwell. A faint glow seeped upward, not light, but something dim and gray, like moonlight filtered through fog. It revealed only shapes, the curve of the banister, the suggestion of steps descending into deeper shadow. And at the bottom, movement. Jimin's breath caught. "Did you see that?" "Yeah." Neither of them spoke the obvious question. What was moving when the hotel was supposed to be empty? The manager had left hours ago, apologizing for a minor electrical issue in town. No other guests had been visible at dinner. The isolation had seemed peaceful then. Now it felt deliberate. A soft thud echoed below, followed by a whisper of fabric. Jimin's imagination surged ahead, painting figures in the dark, faces just beyond sight. He tightened his grip until his knuckles ached. "I can't do this," he admitted, voice breaking. "I feel like something watching us." Jungkook stepped closer until their foreheads nearly touched. Even in darkness, Jimin sensed his gaze steady, unwavering. "Then don't look for it," Jungkook said softly. "Look at me." Jimin let out a shaky laugh. "I can't see you." "You don't need to. You know I'm here." The simplicity of it unraveled something tight in Jimin's chest. He closed his eyes, not that it made a difference in the pitch black, and focused on Jungkook's presence, the warmth, the quiet strength, the familiar cadence of his breathing. The dragging sound stopped. Silence pressed in again, but it felt different now, less predatory, more expectant. Jimin realized his fear wasn't only about the dark. It was about the unknown spaces inside himself he avoided, the vulnerability he masked with humor and perfection. The blackout had stripped away distractions, leaving only raw nerves and truths he rarely voiced. "Why aren't you afraid?" he asked. Jungkook hesitated. "For a long time I was," he said at last, "of losing people, of failing them, of not being enough. Darkness, it just made those thoughts louder. And now," Jungkook's fingers intertwined with his, "now I know I'm not alone in it." A faint click sounded overhead. Light flickered, weak, trembling, and the corridor surged back into view in fractured flashes. Peeling wallpaper, a crooked painting, a trail of muddy footprints leading from the stairwell and stopping halfway down the hall. Jimin stared. Those weren't there before. The lights flickered again, then steadied into a dim, jaundiced glow. The hotel looked abandoned. Dust coated the furniture. The painting's glass was cracked. The air smelled of damp rot rather than pine. The transformation was so abrupt it felt like stepping into a different time. Jungkook's jaw tightened. "We need to get out." They turned toward the lobby, but the corridor behind them was no longer the same. The door to their room had vanished, replaced by a blank stretch of wall. Jimin's pulse roared in his ears. That's not possible. Yet the evidence stood before them. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floorboards, up their legs, into their bones. The lights dimmed again, shadows stretching like reaching hands. Jimin's fear surged, but this time he didn't pull away. He tightened his grip on Jungkook instead. "We'll face it," he said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "Whatever this is." Jungkook glanced at him, something like pride flickering in his eyes. Together. They took a step forward. The hum stopped. The lights flared, bright, blinding, and the corridor snapped back to its original state. Polished wood, warm lamps, pristine carpet. The muddy footprints were gone. The air smelled of pine again. From the lobby, a generator sputtered to life. Jimin exhaled a laugh that trembled on the edge of tears. Did that just happen? Jungkook looked down at their still-clasped hands. "You tell me." They stood there, suspended between relief and disbelief, the normalcy of the hotel now almost more unsettling than the darkness had been. Jimin didn't let go. For the first time that night, the silence felt gentle. The elevator doors slammed shut behind them with a metallic shriek that echoed through the lobby, even though neither of them had touched the controls. Jimin spun around. "I didn't press anything." "I know," Jungkook replied, his voice low, controlled, but no longer calm. His eyes flicked to the darkened display above the doors, where the floor numbers flickered between digits that didn't exist. "We're not alone in this building." The generator's hum sputtered, surged, then settled into an uneven rhythm that felt more like a heartbeat than machinery. The warm light in the lobby cast long shadows that warped the edges of furniture, making the empty armchairs appear occupied, their silhouettes almost human. Jimin forced a laugh that came out brittle. "Okay, not funny. Whoever's doing this, you can stop." No answer came, only the slow tick of the grandfather clock behind the front desk, each second dragging like a fingernail across glass. Jungkook stepped toward the desk, pulling Jimin with him. The surface was immaculate, but the guest book lay open to a page filled with signatures written in the same looping handwriting. Repeated line after line, as if one person had checked in 100 times. Jimin leaned closer. The ink looked fresh. "Tell me you see this," he whispered. "I see it." At the bottom of the page, a name stood out, written deeper, carved almost through the paper. Park Jimin. Jimin recoiled as if burned. "I didn't write that." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "I know you didn't." The clock stopped ticking. Silence collapsed over the lobby, dense and suffocating. Even the generator's pulse faded into nothing. Then, from the hallway leading to the dining room, came the sound of slow, deliberate applause. Jimin's stomach dropped. "No, no, that's not." The clapping continued, measured, mocking. Jungkook's hand slid from Jimin's to his wrist, grip firm, protective. "Stay behind me." "Behind you," Jimin snapped, fear sharpening his tone. "We don't even know what this is." "Exactly." The applause stopped. A figure stood at the far end of the hallway, barely visible in the dim light, tall, still, watching. Jimin's breath came in shallow bursts. "Do you see?" "Yes." The figure took one step forward. The lights flickered. For a split second, the hallway was empty. Then the figure was closer. Jimin grabbed Jungkook's arm. "It's not walking, it's skipping." The words tasted absurd, but there was no other way to describe it. Each flicker of light erased distance without movement, as if reality itself were glitching. Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't look at it directly." "What? Why?" "I don't know, just trust me." Trust, the word hit harder than the fear. Jimin tore his gaze away, focusing instead on the pattern of Jungkook's sleeve, the faint crease near his wrist, the steady rise and fall of his chest. The air grew colder, prickling against his skin, carrying a faint scent of wet earth. The figure stopped. A voice followed, soft, distorted, layered with echoes. "You came back." Jimin's heart lurched. "We've never been here before." The voice seemed to smile. "You always say that." Jungkook's grip tightened. "What do you want?" The lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the room again, thicker than before, pressing against Jimin's eyes like a physical weight. He heard movement, too close, felt a whisper of air against his ear. "You left him," the voice murmured. Jimin's chest constricted. "No." "You let go." "I did." His shout cracked through the dark, raw and desperate. Hands cold, unfamiliar, brushed his shoulder. Jimin recoiled, slamming into Jungkook. "Don't touch me." "I'm right here," Jungkook said immediately, both hands finding his shoulders, grounding him. "Jimin, listen to me. That's not real. It's trying to get into your head." The voice laughed, splintering into multiple tones that overlapped in a dissonant chorus. "He's lying. He always lies. He's afraid you'll see." Jimin froze. "Afraid you'll see." A memory surged. Jungkook, years ago, standing in a practice room doorway, eyes shadowed, saying he was fine when his hands were shaking too hard to hold a water bottle. Jimin had pretended not to notice. They had both chosen silence. "Stop," Jimin whispered. "Stop it." The pressure in the air intensified, like a storm about to break. Jungkook's hands slid down to clasp Jimin's. "Whatever it says, you look at me, not it." "I can't see you." "Then feel me." Jimin tightened his grip, anchoring himself to the warmth, the pulse beneath Jungkook's skin, steady, human, real. The cold presence circled them. "He will leave you, he always leaves first." Jimin's voice shook. "That's not true." A pause. "Then why are you still afraid?" The question pierced deeper than any threat. Because fear had always lived in him, fear of being too much, too fragile, too easy to abandon, fear that the people he loved stayed out of obligation, not choice. His fingers trembled in Jungkook's grasp. "I'm afraid," he admitted, the words barely audible, "but I'm still here." Silence followed. The air shifted, subtle, like a held breath released. Jungkook's forehead rested against his. So am I. The generator roared back to life. Light flooded the lobby, harsh and unforgiving. The hallway stood empty. No figure, no shadows out of place. Only the echo of their own breathing. Jimin's knees weakened, and Jungkook caught him before he could fall. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world felt fragile, as if one wrong word could shatter the thin layer of normalcy that had returned. Did we imagine that? Jimin asked, though he already knew the answer. Jungkook looked toward the guest book. The page was blank. But carved into the wooden desk, deep and splintered, were two words. Don't leave. Jimin stared, throat tightening. It knows. Jungkook's expression hardened, fear giving way to something fiercer. Then we stopped running. Jimin looked at him. You want to confront it. I want to understand why it chose us. A tremor ran through the floor, subtle but undeniable. Somewhere above them, a door slammed. Then another, cascading through the hotel like a chain reaction. Jimin's pulse quickened, but this time the fear carried a sharp edge of resolve. Together, he said. Jungkook nodded, together. They stepped toward the staircase, the lights flickering in uneasy anticipation, the air thick with secrets waiting to be unearthed. The first step on the staircase groaned like a warning. Jimin froze mid-motion, his fingers tightening around the banister as the sound echoed upward through the hollow core of the hotel. Above them, the upper floors dissolved into shadow, the weak lights unable to reach the ceiling. The air smelled different here, colder, tinged with something metallic and damp, like rainwater trapped in rusted pipes. Still want to understand it? Jimin asked, his voice thin but edged with a challenge. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. His gaze traced the dark above, jaw set, eyes sharp with a mixture of fear and defiance. I wanted to stop using your voice, he said at last. Jimin blinked. My voice. When it spoke in the dark, Jungkook said quietly, it sounded like you, not exactly, but close enough to make me doubt what I was hearing. A chill slid down Jimin's spine. It sounded like you to me. They stared at each other. For a moment, the hotel seemed to lean closer, listening. That's not a coincidence, Jungkook muttered. It's trying to turn us against each other. Jimin let out a shaky breath. Then we don't let it. He took another step. The staircase creaked again, louder this time, followed by a sharp crack from somewhere above. Dust sifted down in a thin veil, catching the light like gray snow. Halfway up, the lights flickered violently, plunging them into strobing shadows. In each flash, the walls looked subtly different, wallpaper peeling in one blink, pristine in the next, framed paintings replaced by empty hooks, a long smear along the banister that looked disturbingly like dried blood before vanishing again. Jimin squeezed his eyes shut. Tell me what's real. Jungkook's hand slid into his. This, you me right now. Another flash. They were no longer alone, on the staircase. A woman stood 2 steps above them, her back turned, hair hanging in wet strands down her nightgown. Water dripped steadily from her hem, darkening the wood. Jimin's breath hitched. Jungkook. I see her. The woman's head tilted, not quite human in its angle. Her shoulders trembled as if she were laughing without sound. Vlashi. She was gone. Jimin's heart slammed against his ribs. We need to leave. Jungkook didn't move, or we need to stop running every time it shows us something. That's easy for you to say. The words came out sharper than Jimin intended, but the fear had teeth now, gnawing through his restraint. You act like you're not scared, like you can just push through everything. You don't even admit when something hurts you. Jungkook flinched, as if struck. The silence that followed was heavier than the darkness. You think I don't hurt? Jungkook asked, voice low. I think you hide it so well you forget it's there, Jimin shot back. And then it leaks out in the worst moments, and I'm left guessing what you're really feeling. A tremor ran through the staircase, subtle but insistent, as if the building itself were reacting to their raised voices. Jungkook's grip loosened. You want honesty? Fine, I'm terrified right now, not of ghosts or whatever this place is, of losing you in it, of saying the wrong thing and watching you pull away like you always do when you think you're a burden. Jimin's chest constricted. I don't. You do, Jungkook said, stepping closer. You apologize for existing when you're scared. You make jokes when you're breaking, and you think I don't see it. The words hung between them, raw and unfiltered. For a second, the oppressive atmosphere of the hotel receded, replaced by something more intimate and dangerous, the truth. Jimin's voice trembled, because every time I've needed someone, they eventually left, so I learned to make myself smaller, easier to keep. Jungkook's expression cracked, pain flashing across his face. I never asked you to be small. I know, Jimin whispered, but I was afraid if I took up too much space, you'd realize you deserved someone stronger. The lights steadied, as if the building itself had paused to listen. Jungkook lifted a hand, hesitating before brushing his thumb beneath Jimin's eye. Jimin hadn't realized he was crying. You're the strongest person I know, Jungkook said. You feel everything and still keep going. Do you know how rare that is? A loud bang exploded from the floor above, shattering the moment. They both jerked upward. Footsteps thundered across the ceiling, running, frantic, too heavy to belong to a single person. Jimin's pulse roared. That's not the building settling. No, Jungkook agreed. A scream tore through the air. It was unmistakably Jimin's voice. He clapped a hand over his mouth, horror flooding his veins. That wasn't me. Jungkook's face drained of color. It's trying to lure us. The footsteps stopped directly overhead. A slow, dragging sound followed, like something being pulled across the floor toward the staircase. Jimin's legs felt rooted in place. We can't go up there. We can't stay here either. The temperature dropped sharply, their breath fogged in the air. Then, from the top of the stairs, a figure appeared, Jimin, or something wearing his face. His eyes were hollow, his expression twisted in silent anguish. Dark bruises ringed his throat, as if unseen hands had choked the life from him. Jimin recoiled. No. The double opened its mouth. Why did you let go? It croaked. Jungkook stepped in front of Jimin, fury replacing fear. He didn't. The figure's head snapped toward him, its lips stretched into a grotesque smile. You will. The lights exploded into darkness. A violent force slammed into Jungkook, tearing him from Jimin's grasp. Jimin screamed, lunging forward, hands clawing at empty air. Jungkook! A thud echoed from somewhere below, followed by the sickening crack of wood splintering. Silence! Jungkook, answer me, Jimin's voice broke, panic shredding the edges of every syllable. A faint groan rose from the darkness beneath the stairs. Relief and terror collided in his chest. He dropped to his knees, fumbling along the steps until his fingers found fabric, Jungkook's sleeve, damp and cold. I'm here, Jungkook rasped, still here. Jimin collapsed against him, shaking. Don't ever scare me like that again. Jungkook let out a weak laugh. I didn't do it on purpose. Their foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling in the dark. For a moment, the hotel was silent. Then the staircase behind them began to rot. Wood softened under their hands, turning spongy, decaying in seconds. The banister sagged, splitting open to reveal darkness inside, an impossible void where solid structure should be. Jimin stared in horror. It's collapsing. Then we move, Jungkook said, forcing himself upright despite the pain in his voice. He tightened his grip on Jimin's hand. No matter what it shows us, no matter what it says, we don't let go. Jimin nodded, tears streaking his cheeks, fear still clawing at his ribs, but beneath it, something steadier had taken root. They stumbled down the remaining steps, just as the staircase behind them caved in, swallowed by shadow without a sound. When they reached the lobby floor, the lights snapped back on. The staircase stood intact. No rot, no collapse, no damage. Only the echo of what they had felt, what they had almost lost. Jimin looked down. Their hands were still clasped, fingers locked so tightly it hurt. This time, neither of them tried to loosen their grip. A slow, deliberate knock echoed from the front doors of the hotel. Jimin and Jungkook froze in the center of the lobby, hands still locked together, breaths uneven from the staircase that had both collapsed and not collapsed behind them. The sound came again, 3 measured knocks, too calm to belong to someone in distress, too precise to be accidental. "No one knows we're here," Jimin whispered. Jungkook didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the doors, on the narrow seam of darkness between them. The brass handles trembled, vibrating with each knock, as if the building itself were relaying the message. "Knock, knock, knock." "Don't open it," Jimin said quickly, the words tumbling over each other. "Please, whatever this place is, it wants us to make the wrong choices." Jungkook swallowed. "What if it's someone trapped like us?" Jimin's grip tightened. "And what if it's not?" Silence fell again, thick and expectant. Then from the other side of the doors came a voice, soft, muffled by the wood. "Jungkook, let me in." Jimin felt Jungkook stiffen beside him. "That's not possible," Jungkook breathed. The voice came again, clearer this time. "It's me, you promised you wouldn't leave me outside." Jimin's heart pounded. "Who is that?" Jungkook's lips parted, but no sound came out. The knock returned, more urgent now. The door shuddered with each impact, dust drifting from the frame. "Jungkook," the voice pleaded, cracking with emotion. "It's cold, I'm scared." Jimin stepped in front of him. "Look at me, you know this isn't real. It's doing exactly what you said, using voices." But Jungkook's eyes were distant, locked on the door as if seeing through it, beyond it, into a memory only he could access. "You don't understand," he murmured. "Then make me understand," Jimin shot back, fear sharpening into frustration. "Don't shut me out now." Another knock, louder, desperate. "Please," the voice sobbed. "You said you'd stay." Jungkook flinched like he'd been struck, his fingers loosened from Jimin's. "Don't," Jimin said, panic rising. "Don't you dare let go." Jungkook's hand hovered between them, trembling. "I left someone once," he said hoarsely. "In a storm, I thought I'd come back in minutes. I didn't make it." Jimin's anger dissolved into shock. "You never told me." "I never told anyone." The door rattled violently now, the hinges screaming under the strain. "Open the door," the voice cried. "You owe me that." Jimin grabbed Jungkook's collar, forcing him to meet his eyes. "Listen to me, that guilt is real, your regret is real, but that voice is not. If you open that door, you're not saving anyone, you're letting this place inside you." The words hung between them, raw and dangerous. For a second, Jungkook looked torn in two, one half rooted in the present, the other dragged toward a past he had never shared. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then a whisper slid through the seam of the door. "I waited for you until morning." Jungkook's breath hitched. The handle turned. Jimin reacted without thinking. He shoved Jungkook backward as the doors burst inward with a deafening crack, slamming against the walls hard enough to splinter the wood. Cold air flooded the lobby, carrying the scent of rain and something older, decay, grief, abandonment. But there was no one there. Only darkness beyond the threshold, thick and impenetrable, as if the world outside the hotel had been erased. Jimin's chest heaved. "You see, there's nothing." Jungkook stared at the void, his face pale, eyes glistening. "I hear him." Before Jimin could respond, a hand shot out of the darkness and seized Jungkook's wrist. Jungkook shouted as the grip tightened, inhumanly strong, dragging him toward the doorway. "Jungkook," Jimin lunged, wrapping both arms around his waist, heels digging into the carpet as he pulled back with everything he had. "Let go of him." The unseen force yanked harder. Jungkook's fingers clawed at Jimin's sleeve, desperation written across his face. "Don't let me go," Jungkook gasped. "Never," Jimin cried, his voice breaking. For a moment, the struggle became a brutal stalemate. Jungkook caught between past and present, guilt and loyalty, darkness and the person refusing to release him. Then Jungkook screamed, not in fear but in fury. "I stayed," he shouted into the void. "I came back. You were already gone. I have carried that every day. What more do you want from me?" The grip on his wrist faltered. The darkness seemed to wrinkle, rippling like disturbed water. Jimin tightened his hold. "You don't owe the dead your life," he said fiercely. "You're still here, with me, that's what matters." The hand released Jungkook. He collapsed into Jimin's arms, shaking violently as the void beyond the doorway shrank, folding inward like a closing wound. The doors slammed shut on their own, the impact reverberating through the lobby. Silence returned, this time fragile, almost reverent. Jungkook buried his face against Jimin's shoulder. His breath hot and uneven. I thought if I ever faced him again, he'd hate me." Jimin's arms tightened around him. "Maybe he didn't. Maybe that was your fear speaking. Or maybe this place feeds on the things we never forgave ourselves for." Jungkook let out a broken laugh. "That's a long list." "Good," Jimin said softly. "We'll burn through it together." They stood like that for a long moment, the hotel eerily still around them. The clock behind the desk began ticking again, each second steady and grounding. Jungkook pulled back slightly, searching Jimin's face. "Why didn't you run?" Jimin frowned. "Run. When it grabbed me, you could have let go, saved yourself." Jimin's expression hardened with a fierce tenderness. "You still don't get it, do you? I'm not here because it's safe. I'm here because it's you." The words landed between them, heavier than any supernatural threat they had faced. Jungkook's eyes widened, something unguarded breaking through the walls he had built for years. "Jimin." A low rumble shook the building, cutting him off. The chandelier overhead swayed, crystals chiming like distant bells. From somewhere deep within the hotel came the sound of multiple doors creaking open in unison. Jimin exhaled slowly. "It's not done with us." "No," Jungkook agreed, his grip on Jimin's hand firm once more. "But it's running out of ways to scare me." A faint crack split the wall behind the front desk. Plaster crumbled, revealing old wallpaper beneath, patterned with the same looping handwriting from the guest book. Names, hundreds of them. All crossed out. Except two. Park Jimin, Jun Jungkook. Jimin's pulse thundered in his ears. "It's marking us." Jungkook stared at the names, then at their joined hands. "Then we make sure it remembers we were never alone." The lights flickered, but this time neither of them flinched. They stood their ground as the hotel groaned around them, fear still present but no longer in control, their shared warmth, a defiance the darkness could not extinguish. The wall behind the front desk split open with a sound like bone tearing. Plaster cascaded to the floor in pale clouds, revealing a narrow passage hidden within the structure of the hotel, a corridor too thin to be part of any architectural plan, its walls raw wood and rusted pipes, its darkness thick and absolute. A cold draft exhaled from the opening, carrying the stale breath of something long sealed away. Jimin stared, his pulse hammering. That wasn't there before. Jungkook's grip on his hand tightened, not in fear but in grim recognition. This place isn't changing, it's revealing. The passage seemed to inhale, drawing the air toward it in a slow, steady pull, as if inviting or demanding their approach. "Tell me we're not going in there," Jimin said, though he already knew the answer. Jungkook looked at the names carved into the exposed wall, Park Jimin, Jun Jungkook, not crossed out. "If we stay out here, it keeps hunting us," he said. "If we go in, maybe we find out why." Jimin let out a breath that trembled between dread and reluctant resolve. "You always choose the harder path." "And you always follow," Jungkook replied softly. Jimin shot him a look. Don't sound so sure. But he didn't let go. They stepped into the passage together. The temperature dropped immediately, the air thick with the smell of damp wood, iron, and something faintly sweet, like old flowers left too long in stagnant water. The narrow walls forced their shoulders to brush, their footsteps muffled by a layer of dust that had not been disturbed in years. Behind them, the lobby lights flickered, then vanished. Darkness swallowed the entrance. Jimin's breath quickened. Jungkook. I'm here. The reassurance came instantly, his voice a tether in the void. Jungkook's thumb traced slow, grounding circles against the back of Jimin's hand, a silent rhythm that kept panic at bay. They moved forward blindly, guided only by touch and the faint slope of the floor beneath their feet. Pipes rattled within the walls, carrying distant echoes, whispers that might have been words if not for the distortion of rust and time. Do you hear that? Jimin murmured. It sounds like breathing, Jungkook said. The passage widened abruptly, the darkness thinning into a dim, grey glow that seemed to seep from the floor itself. They stepped into a hidden room, a long, low space lined with doors, each one identical, each one slightly ajar. A hospital corridor. Jimin's stomach dropped. This can't be part of a hotel. The smell hit him next. Antiseptic, decay, the copper tang of old blood buried beneath layers of chemical cleanliness. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly pallor over peeling paint and rusted gurneys abandoned against the walls. Jungkook's voice was barely audible. This place was built on something. One of the doors creaked open. Jimin flinched. We didn't touch it. Inside, a narrow room held a single bed with leather restraints hanging loose at the sides. The mattress was indented as if someone had risen moments ago. On the wall above it, deep gouges marred the plaster, tally marks, carved in frantic repetition. Jimin counted without meaning to. 37. Days, Jungkook suggested. Or people, Jimin whispered. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, the sound drilling into his skull. He pressed his free hand to his temple. I feel sick. Jungkook guided him back into the corridor. Don't look too long, it wants you to. A metallic clang rang out behind them. They turned. Every door in the corridor had swung open. The rooms beyond were not empty. Figures stood inside each one, motionless, their faces obscured by shadow. Some wore hospital gowns, others tattered clothing from different eras, decades layered atop one another in silent testimony. Their heads tilted in unison as Jimin and Jungkook stared. Jimin's voice trembled. They're watching us. A man stepped out from the nearest room. His movements were stiff, unnatural, as if his joints had forgotten how to bend. Bruises ringed his wrists, and a hospital tag dangled from his ankle, the name long since faded. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Another figure emerged, then another. Jimin's grip on Jungkook became almost painful. We need to go, now. The figures began to move, not toward them but past them, shuffling down the corridor in a slow procession. Their shoulders brushed Jimin's, cold and insubstantial, like mist shaped into human form. Each contact sent a jolt of grief through his chest, flashes of loneliness, fear, betrayal, abandonment, emotions not his own, but felt with terrifying clarity. He gasped, they're showing me things. Jungkook's jaw clenched as a figure passed through him, leaving frost in its wake. Don't absorb it, let it pass. I can't, Jimin choked. It's too much. The procession continued, an endless stream of the forgotten. Some clutched invisible wounds, others reached out, as if begging to be held. One stopped directly in front of Jungkook, a boy no older than 15, rainwater dripping from his hair, eyes wide with accusation. Jungkook's breath hitched. You. The boy raised a trembling hand, pointing not in anger, but in sorrow. Jimin saw Jungkook's composure fracture. You knew him. I left him, Jungkook whispered. I thought he'd make it home, I thought. The boy's hand dropped. He stepped forward and pressed his forehead to Jungkook's chest. Jungkook froze. "I'm sorry," he said, the words breaking apart. "I was young, I was stupid, I was afraid." The boy's form flickered, then dissolved into a cold mist that sank into the floor. The corridor fell silent. All the other figures were gone. Jimin stared at Jungkook, his own fear momentarily eclipsed by the raw grief on his face. "You were just a kid too," he said softly. "You weren't responsible for the whole world." Jungkook laughed bitterly. "Try telling that to the ghosts in my head." Jimin stepped closer, lifting a shaking hand to Jungkook's cheek. "Then let me share them. You don't have to carry them alone." The fluorescent lights exploded in a shower of sparks. Darkness slammed down. This time, the dark was not empty. Hands brushed their arms, their shoulders, their backs, dozens of them, cold and desperate, clutching, pleading without words. The air filled with fragmented whispers layered atop one another, a cacophony of unfinished sentences and swallowed screams. Jimin's panic surged. "Jungkook, they're pulling me." "I've got you," Jungkook shouted, wrapping both arms around him, anchoring him against his chest. "They can't have you." The pressure intensified, dragging at their clothes, their hair, their skin, as if the darkness itself were trying to peel them apart. "Why us?" Jimin cried, his voice raw. "Why won't it let us go?" Jungkook's answer came through gritted teeth. "Because we're still holding on." A sudden, violent force yanked at their joined hands, trying to pry their fingers apart. Pain shot through Jimin's knuckles. "Don't let go," Jungkook gasped. "I'm trying." The whispers rose to a shriek. Then through the chaos, a single voice cut clear, calm, ancient, resonant. "Two who refuse to abandon, two who defy the pattern." The hands froze. The pressure lifted. Light returned in a slow, pulsing glow. They stood alone in the corridor again. The hospital doors were gone, the peeling paint replaced by polished wood. The smell of antiseptic faded back into pine and dust. They were back in the hotel. But the air had changed. It no longer felt predatory. It felt watchful. Jimin sagged against Jungkook, exhausted. Did we pass something, or did it just change the game? Jungkook rested his forehead against his. "I don't think this place wants to destroy us." "Then what?" His answer was barely a whisper. "I think it wants us to prove it wrong." The ceiling lights dimmed to a dull amber, as if the hotel itself was slipping into a slower heartbeat. Jimin and Jungkook remained in the corridor, foreheads nearly touching, their breath still uneven from the crush of invisible hands that had tried to tear them apart. The air no longer clawed at their lungs, but it wasn't safe either. It felt like the pause between waves, the fragile stillness before something larger returned. "Prove it wrong," Jimin repeated, his voice hoarse. "Prove what wrong?" Jungkook didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved past Jimin's shoulder, scanning the hallway as though he expected it to shift again at any moment. "That everyone leaves," he said finally. "That fear always wins, that people break under pressure." Jimin let out a shaky breath. "That's a lot to prove in one night." A faint sound drifted from behind them. A piano, somewhere deep in the hotel, playing a melody so soft it was almost memory rather than music. The notes were slow and uneven, as if played by someone unfamiliar with the instrument or someone whose hands trembled too badly to control the keys. Jimin turned. There was no piano in the lobby. "There is now," Jungkook said. The melody shifted into a song Jimin recognized, one he hadn't heard since childhood, when his grandmother used to hum it while folding laundry. The familiarity struck him with a force more disorienting than any apparition. "That's impossible," he whispered. "No one else knows this." The music faltered, then resumed, closer. Jungkook watched Jimin carefully. "It's pulling from your memories now." Jimin swallowed, "Or from what I miss most." The hallway stretched ahead, longer than it had been before, lit by wall lamps that flickered in uneven intervals. At the far end stood an open doorway spilling warm light onto the carpet. The piano was inside. Don't, Jungkook said gently as Jimin took a step forward. You don't have to chase every ghost it shows you. Jimin's jaw tightened. What if it's not a ghost? What if it's a part of me I left behind? Jungkook's expression softened, but he didn't let go. Then I'm coming with you. They walked toward the doorway together. The music grew clearer, each note echoing in the hollow spaces beneath Jimin's ribs. The room beyond was not part of the hotel's design. It was a living room from another time, floral wallpaper, lace curtains, a worn sofa with a blanket draped over the back. The air smelled of detergent and warm fabric. At the piano sat an elderly woman, her back to them, her grey hair pinned in the exact style Jimin remembered. His breath shattered, Halmione. Her hands stilled on the keys. Slowly she turned. Her face was as he remembered, soft lines, kind eyes, but there was something wrong in the stillness of her smile, in the way her gaze seemed to pass through him rather than meet him. You came back late, she said, her voice gentle but hollow. Jimin stepped forward before he could stop himself. I tried to come sooner. Jungkook's grip tightened. Jimin, wait. But Jimin couldn't. The room pulled at him with the gravity of unresolved love. I was busy. I thought there would be more time. Her smile widened, stretching just slightly too far. There is always more time until there is. The piano keys depressed on their own, striking a discordant chord. Jungkook stepped in front of Jimin. You're not her. The woman's head tilted, and you are not the one she called for. The temperature in the room plummeted. The lace curtains stiffened with frost. Jimin's voice shook. If you're not her, then stop wearing her face. Her expression faltered. For a moment, something else flickered beneath the surface, a distortion, like a reflection rippling in disturbed water. Her eyes darkened, the warmth draining away. You left before the last song, she said, her voice splintering into overlapping tones. You said you would return, you didn't. Guilt surged through Jimin, hot and suffocating. I was afraid to see you fading, he whispered. I wanted to remember you strong. The room shuddered. The piano slammed shut, the sound like a gunshot. Jungkook turned to him, eyes fierce. You were protecting yourself. That's human. That's not abandonment. The figure rose from the bench, movements jerky, unnatural. Excuses, it hissed. Jimin's hands trembled. No truth. He stepped around Jungkook, forcing himself to meet the hollow gaze. I loved you, I still do, but I couldn't watch you disappear piece by piece. That doesn't mean I left you, it means I was breaking too. The distortion intensified. The floral wallpaper peeled away in strips, revealing the hotel's rotting walls beneath. The scent of detergent curdled into mildew. The figure's face cracked, the illusion splintering. Love does not leave. Jungkook's voice cut through the tension. Love stays in the ones who survive. The room fell silent. The figure's form wavered, the features of Jimin's grandmother dissolving into a blur of shadow and light. When it spoke again, the voice was neither hers nor the hotel's. It was something older, quieter. Two who remain, it murmured. The illusion collapsed. They stood once more in an empty hotel room, bare walls, no piano, no furniture, only dust and the faint imprint of where the bench had been. Jimin's knees buckled. Jungkook caught him instantly, lowering them both to the floor. Jimin's shoulders shook with silent sobs he had held back for years. I didn't say goodbye, he choked. I thought avoiding it would make it hurt less. Jungkook held him tightly, one hand cradling the back of his head. Goodbyes don't measure love, staying in someone's heart does. Jimin's fingers clutched the front of Jungkook's shirt. What if one day I lose you too? The question hung between them, raw and unguarded. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Then you'll still have every moment we fought to stay together, and you won't have to wonder if you were worth staying for, because I'm here, are I? Jimin pulled back just enough to search his face, fear and hope colliding in his eyes. Why are you really here, Jungkook? Not in this hotel, with me? Why haven't you left? Jungkook's composure finally cracked, the truth spilling out in a rush. Because every time I thought about walking away, it felt like cutting out a piece of myself. Because you see me when I don't want to be seen. Because you stayed the night I thought I didn't deserve anyone. Because loving you is the only thing that's ever made fear feel smaller. The confession hung in the stale air, electric and irreversible. Jimin's breath caught, "You're in love with me." Jungkook's laugh was soft, almost disbelieving. I thought that was obvious. For a moment, the hotel seemed to hold its breath. Jimin's fear surged, of change, of vulnerability, of the fragile hope blooming in his chest. But beneath it was something steadier, warmer, impossible to ignore. "I'm terrified," he admitted, "not of this place, of losing what we have if we cross that line." Jungkook's thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down Jimin's cheek. "We crossed it the moment we refused to let go." The lights flickered, not violently this time, but gently like a pulse. The oppressive weight in the air eased. Jimin exhaled a shaky laugh. "I think it's listening." "Good," Jungkook said. "Let it." He leaned forward, resting his forehead against Jimin's once more, their breaths mingling in the dim light. There was no dramatic rush, no desperate urgency, just a quiet, deliberate closeness that felt more defiant than any shouted declaration. The hotel did not lash out. It did not distort. It did not try to pull them apart. For the first time since the blackout began, the silence felt like acceptance rather than threat. Somewhere in the distance, the piano resumed, soft, steady, no longer trembling. Jimin closed his eyes, his hand tightening in Jungkook. "I'm still afraid," he whispered. Jungkook's reply was warm against his skin. "Me too." Their fingers remained intertwined. And the hotel, at last, grew still. The stillness did not last. A deep vibration rolled through the floor, subtle at first, then strong enough to rattle the windows and send dust drifting from the ceiling in pale, ghost-like veils. The soft piano melody warped mid-note, the sound stretching into a dissonant groan before cutting off entirely. Jimin's fingers tightened around Jungkook's. That didn't feel like the hotel listening. Jungkook shook his head slowly. No, that felt like it deciding. The lights dimmed to a dim red glow, bathing the hallway in a color that turned every shadow into something visceral and alive. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of iron and damp stone, like the breath of something ancient rising from beneath the foundations. A low crack split the wall behind them. Then another. Hairline fractures spiderwebbed across the plaster, spreading with deliberate slowness, as if something on the other side were tracing the outline of a door from within. The sound was unmistakable, nails dragging, patient, relentless. Jimin's voice trembled despite his effort to steady it. "It's not showing us memories anymore." "No," Jungkook said, "now it's showing us what it is." The wall gave way. Plaster crumbled outward, revealing a vast hollow beyond, an impossible cavern beneath the hotel, its depths swallowed by darkness. A staircase spiraled downward into the void, each step carved from black stone that seemed to drink the red light rather than reflect it. Cold air surged upward, carrying whispers layered so densely they formed a continuous murmur, like a crowd speaking in a language no living person remembered. Jimin stared into the abyss. How can this exist under a building that small? "It doesn't follow our rules," Jungkook replied. The whispering grew louder, resolving into fragments of phrases. "Stay. Don't leave. Why did you go? We waited." Jimin's chest tightened. "It's everyone all at once." A figure emerged from the darkness below, climbing the spiral steps with slow, deliberate movements. Its form shifted with each step, an old man hunched with grief, a child clutching a broken toy, a woman with tear-streaked cheeks, faces blurring together as if identity itself were dissolving. Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not a ghost." The figure stopped halfway up the staircase. When it spoke, the sound carried every voice they had heard that night, layered into one. You remained. Jimin swallowed. We didn't come here to fight you. Fight, the entity echoed, almost curious. You fight yourselves. The red light pulsed, synchronized with the deep vibration in the floor. Jungkook stepped forward despite Jimin's tightening grip. You've been feeding on fear, on guilt, on abandonment. Why? The entity's form rippled, faces surfacing and dissolving like reflections in black water. We are what remains when promises break, when doors close, when hands release. Jimin's voice shook. You're the echo of everyone who was left behind. A pause. Left, forgotten, denied. The words pressed into the air like physical weight. Jungkook's jaw clenched. We didn't leave each other. The entity tilted its shifting head. Not yet. The staircase groaned, stone grinding against stone. The void below deepened, the whispers rising into a mournful wail that clawed at Jimin's chest. A sudden force slammed into him from behind. He cried out as invisible hands seized his arms, dragging him toward the edge of the spiral. His shoes scraped against the floor, friction burning through the soles. Jimin, Jungkook lunged, catching his wrist just before he crossed the threshold into the void. The pull intensified, relentless, trying to peel them apart finger by finger. Let go, the entity murmured, all due in time. Jimin's grip faltered, pain shot through his hand, tendons screaming under the strain. Jungkook, I can't. You can, Jungkook shouted, his voice raw. Look at me. Jimin forced his gaze upward. Jungkook's face was strained, eyes blazing with a fierce, desperate certainty. I am not leaving you, Jungkook said, each word carved from breath and will. Not in fear, not in guilt, not in death, do you hear me? The pull strengthened, dragging Jimin another inch toward the void. The darkness below churned, shapes forming and dissolving in a tide of reaching arms. Why, the entity asked, its many voices overlapping. All leave, all fail, all break. Jungkook's fingers tightened until their knuckles blanched. Because he is not a burden to survive, he is the reason I do. The words struck with the force of a confession and a vow intertwined. The pulling stopped. The void stilled. Jimin hung suspended between darkness and Jungkook's grasp, his breath ragged, tears blurring his vision. You idiot, he choked. You don't get to say things like that when I'm about to die. A broken laugh escaped Jungkook. Then don't die. Jimin's other hand shot upward, locking around Jungkook's forearm. With a cry born of equal parts fear and fury, he pulled himself forward. The invisible grip resisted for one final second. Then shattered. He collapsed against Jungkook, both of them falling hard onto the floor, their breaths tearing from their lungs in harsh gasps. The red light flickered wildly, the whispers collapsing into a low, uncertain murmur. The entity watched. Its shifting faces slowed, features lingering longer before dissolving. When it spoke again, its voice had lost some of its weight. You resist the pattern. Jimin forced himself upright, refusing to release Jungkook even as his arms trembled. We're not your proof that everyone leaves, he said. We are proof that some people stay, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Silence spread outward, rippling through the cavern. The spiral staircase began to crumble, not in violence, but in erosion, the black stone flacking into ash that drifted upward and vanished. The void beneath receded, folding into itself like a closing eye. The entity's form fractured, the countless faces separating into faint outlines of individuals. Men, women, children, no longer merged into a single mass of grief. We waited, they whispered, no longer accusing, only tired. Jungkook's voice softened. You were never waiting for someone to return, you were waiting for permission to let go. The words settled into the space like falling snow. One by one, the outlines dissolved, not into darkness, but into a dim, silver light that rose and disappeared into the ceiling above. The red glow faded. The hotel walls reformed, sealing the cavern behind smooth plaster as though it had never existed. Silence followed, not oppressive, not watchful, but profoundly empty. Jimin sagged against Jungkook, exhaustion replacing adrenaline. Is it over? Jungkook looked around the restored hallway, the steady lights, the absence of whispers. He exhaled slowly. I think it finally stopped holding its breath. Jimin let out a weak laugh. I almost didn't make it. But you did, Jungkook said. We did. Jimin tilted his head back, studying Jungkook's face in the soft light, the stubborn set of his jaw, the vulnerability he no longer tried to hide. You really meant it, he said quietly. What you said. Jungkook didn't look away, every word. Fear flickered in Jimin's chest, but it no longer paralyzed him. It felt like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown and choosing to step forward anyway. He tightened his grip on Jungkook's hand. Then don't let go, not when this place is gone, not when it's just us and whatever comes next. Jungkook's fingers intertwined with his. I won't. The lights steadied into a warm glow. For the first time since the blackout, the hotel felt like a building again. Wood, glass, quiet hallways carrying the faint hum of electricity and the distant sigh of wind against the windows. No whispers. No footsteps that weren't their own. Only two people standing in the aftermath of something that had tried to prove love was weaker than fear and had failed. Jimin leaned his forehead against Jungkook, eyes closing, breath finally slowing into something like peace. Outside, dawn began to gather at the horizon, pale light pressing against the windows, patient and inevitable. The night refused to breathe. Rain battered the city like a warning no one wanted to hear, turning the streets into mirrors of broken light. Inside the dim warehouse, the air was thick with gasoline, sweat, and betrayal. No one spoke at first. They just stared at each other, five people bound by lies that had finally run out of places to hide. Adrian's jaw tightened. You told them, he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the storm. You sold us out. Maya didn't flinch, but her fingers trembled at her sides. I did what I had to do. A bitter laugh escaped Raffi. Had to, you had to hand our names to the people who want us dead. Her eyes snapped toward him. You think I had a choice? They had my brother. They sent me videos, Raffi, videos. Her voice cracked, the word collapsing under the weight of memory. Silence swallowed the room again, but it was different now, heavier, suffocating. Jonas stepped forward, rain dripping from his coat. So you chose him over all of us. I chose blood, Maya shot back, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. What would you have done? Let them carve him apart just to prove your loyalty to a cause that's already dying. Adrian's fist slammed into a metal table, the clang echoing like a gunshot. Don't you dare call it dying. People have already died for this. And more will, she whispered, because you refuse to see the truth. We're not revolutionaries anymore. We're ghosts clinging to a war that ended without us. Raffi lunged forward, fury overtaking reason. Jonas caught him before he reached her, both men struggling as chairs toppled and metal screeched across concrete. She's lying, Raffi shouted. This is how they break us, they make us doubt each other. Maya's voice rose, raw and desperate. Then look at me and tell me you wouldn't do the same if it were your family. He froze. The answer hung between them, unspoken and damning. Thunder roared overhead, rattling the rusted beams. Adrian turned away, pressing his palms against his eyes as if he could crush the reality out of existence. How much did you tell them? He asked, quieter now, more dangerous. Maya hesitated. That hesitation was the loudest confession. Jonas released Raffi slowly. Names, he asked. She nodded once. Locations. Another nod. Adrian exhaled like a man already drowning. Then they're coming. As if summoned by the words, headlights sliced through the warehouse windows. Engines growled outside, not one but several. Doors slammed. Boots hit puddles in synchronized rhythm. Raffi's face drained of color. How long? They said midnight, Maya whispered. I thought we had more time. Adrian checked his watch. 11:58. A hollow, humorless smile crossed his lips. We always did have a talent for being exactly 2 minutes too late. Jonas moved first, grabbing a duffel bag and tossing weapons onto the table. We can still fight our way out. Fight who? Adrian snapped. Half the city's tactical units are out there. This isn't a raid, it's an execution. Maya stepped forward, voice shaking. There's a tunnel under the east wall. It leads to the drainage canals. They don't know about it. Raffi stared at her like she was a stranger, and we're supposed to trust you now. You don't have to trust me, she said, swallowing hard. Just trust your desire to live. A crash echoed from the front entrance, metal buckling under force. Shouts followed, orders barked through megaphones. Adrian looked at each of them, memorizing faces he might never see again. We split, he said. Pairs. If one group gets caught, the other might make it. No, Maya said immediately. We stay together. That's the only chance we have. He held her gaze, searching for the truth in a face that had become a battlefield. You don't get to decide that anymore. Another crash. The doors wouldn't hold much longer. Raffi grabbed a rifle, hands steady despite the storm inside him. If I die tonight, he muttered, I'm taking at least one of them with me. Jonas clapped his shoulder. You always were dramatic. Shut up, Raffi replied, but the corner of his mouth twitched, the ghost of a friendship refusing to die. Maya turned to Adrian, voice barely audible. I never wanted this. He stared at her for a long moment. That's the problem, he said. None of us did, but we chose it anyway. The doors finally gave way with a deafening crash. Floodlights pierced the darkness, turning the warehouse into a stage of harsh white and long shadows. Armed figures poured in, shouting commands no one intended to obey. Adrian grabbed Maya's wrist. For a second, she thought he meant to hand her over. Instead, he pulled her toward the east wall. Move, he said. Gunfire erupted, concrete splintered. Someone screamed. It was impossible to tell who. The world became noise, light, and the metallic taste of fear. As they reached the hidden hatch, Maya looked back. Raffi and Jonas were covering their escape, firing into the blinding lights, silhouettes standing against impossible odds. Don't stop, Jonas shouted. That's an order. Maya's vision blurred. We can't leave them. Adrian forced the hatch open. If we stay, they died for nothing. Another explosion of gunfire, Raffi's voice hoarse and defiant. Go. Adrian shoved Maya into the darkness below. He followed, slamming the hatch shut just as bullets tore through the space where they'd stood. In the suffocating black of the tunnel, the world narrowed to ragged breathing and distant echoes of war above them. Maya slid down the damp wall, sobs tearing free at last. I destroyed everything. Adrian stood over her, chest heaving, rainwater and tears indistinguishable on his face. For a moment, he looked like he might agree. Instead, he sank to the ground beside her. No, he said quietly, you just revealed what was already broken. Above them, the gunfire slowed, then stopped. The silence that followed was far more terrifying than the storm. The tunnel seemed endless, a narrow throat of concrete swallowing the last echoes of gunfire from the world above. Adrian and Maya moved in silence, their footsteps splashing through shallow water that smelled of rust and decay. Every sound felt too loud, every breath stolen. Neither of them dared to speak Raffi and Jonas's names. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a drainage chamber where a single flickering maintenance light struggled against the darkness. The stormwater roared through a grated channel, carrying leaves, trash, and the remnants of a city that would forget them by morning. Maya stopped walking. I can't go any further, she said, her voice hollow. If they're dead, then what was the point? Adrian didn't answer right away. He stared at the rushing water as if searching for something in its chaos, absolution, maybe, or a reason to keep breathing. The point, he said finally, is that we're still here, whether we deserve to be or not. She laughed weakly. You think we deserve it? No, he admitted, but they didn't die so we could follow them out of guilt. The words landed hard. Maya sank onto a concrete ledge, burying her face in her hands. I can still hear them, she whispered. Jonah's shouting, Raffi telling us to go. I traded their lives for a few more minutes of my brother's. Adrian's expression tightened. You don't know that he's alive. She looked up, eyes wide with fragile hope and terror. They promised. They lie, Adrian said. That's how they win. The maintenance light flickered again, plunging them into darkness for a heartbeat before sputtering back to life. In that momentary blackness, the truth settled between them. There was no safe ending waiting at the other side of the tunnel. No reunion, no forgiveness, only consequences. Footsteps echoed faintly from the passage behind them. Both froze. Did you hear that? Maya whispered. Adrian nodded slowly, reaching for the pistol tucked into his jacket. The sound came again, uneven, dragging, not the synchronized march of tactical units, just one person, injured. A shadow appeared at the far end of the tunnel, staggering into the weak light. For a split second, Maya couldn't breathe. Raffi, she choked. He leaned against the wall, blood soaking his sleeve, face pale but unmistakably alive. You too owe me a better exit plan, he rasped. Maya let out a broken sob, rushing to him. Jonah's. Raffi's eyes darkened. He shook his head once. The grief that followed was quieter than the storm, deeper than the gunfire. Adrian closed his eyes, the weight of command finally crushing whatever resolve he had left. Jonah's had always been the one who believed they could survive this war with their souls intact. Now that illusion was buried somewhere under concrete and bullet casings. Raffi slid down the wall, wincing. They'll lock the city down by morning, he said. Checkpoints, drones, your faces everywhere. Our faces were already everywhere, Adrian replied bitterly. We just refused to look. Maya helped Raffi sit, her hands shaking as she pressed fabric against his wound. We can still leave, she said, more to herself than to them. The canals lead to the river, from there. From there we become ghosts, Adrian finished. No cause, no names, just survivors. Raffi managed a faint, humorless smile, better than martyrs. The word hung in the air, heavy with the memory of Jonas's last stand. For a long time, the three of them sat in silence, listening to the water rush past, a relentless reminder that the world never stopped for grief. Somewhere above, sirens wailed. Somewhere beyond, people were waking up, making coffee, complaining about the rain, unaware that a war had ended in a forgotten warehouse. Maya finally spoke. If we disappear, if we live, we tell the truth, all of it. No more secrets, no more causes that devour the people who believe in them. Adrian studied her, searching for the same resolve that had once made her dangerous. He saw something different now, not fire, but clarity forged in loss. Truth won't bring them back, he said. No, she agreed, but lies killed them. Raffi exhaled slowly. Then we make it mean something, or they really did die for nothing. The flickering light steadied at last, casting them in a pale, fragile glow. 3 survivors in a city that would hunt them by sunrise. 3 witnesses to the cost of loyalty, love, and the terrible math of choosing who lives and who doesn't. Adrian stood and offered a hand to each of them. No more running for a cause, he said. We run for the truth. Maya took his hand. Raffi followed. Together, they turned toward the canal's dark mouth, where the stormwater vanished into the unknown. Behind them lay the ghosts of who they had been, revolutionaries, traitors, friends. Ahead lay no promises, only the chance to live with what they had done. As they disappeared into the current's roar, the city above began to quiet. The rain softened, the sirens faded. Morning, indifferent and inevitable, waited on the horizon. And somewhere in that coming light, the truth, scarred, incomplete, and hard as concrete, would finally have a chance to be heard.